Hello, today I'm talking about the tin can, or rather, how hunger became a supply chain. That's a mildly disturbing sentence if you let it sit for a moment. Hunger used to be intimate, it lived close by, it arrived with weather, wages and bad harvests. It had a face, it belonged to a place. The tin can turned it into logistics, something managed in a warehouse with a shipping schedule and a barcode gun that goes beep like a cheerful little lie. But this essay isn't really about tins. Well, it is, but it's also about the quiet machinery of modern life and the objects that make it feel normal. And if you think this is going to stay in the food cupboard, it doesn't. It ends in Uruguay at a place called the Kitchen of the World, where a cow became 7 minutes. I like tins because they don't demand optimism. A tin will wait. You can lose a week, a job, your mind, and the tin just sits there, patient and mildly Victorian. It's the only thing in the kitchen that doesn't need maintenance or belief. The tin can is a small blunt marvel, a sealed portable container that keeps food stable over time. It lets empires move, it makes out of season feel normal. It's great design precisely because it's unnoticed. It sits in cupboards like mute reassurance stacked behind the pasta. You're unlikely to notice the deeper bargain it represents. Preservation traded for distance, flavour traded for shelf life, need reframed as choice. A can is a meal that's been industrialised, standardised and made obedient. Nourishment turned into inventory, comfort with a barcode. And once you see it as infrastructure rather than a tin of soup, it's far less quaint and more political. Because preservation is never just preservation. It's reach, it's control, it's the ability to feed people who aren't near food. Which sounds like civilization until you remember that invading armies, high security prisons and colonial outposts also enjoy being fed. The official origin story likes to begin in 1810 because history prefers tidy narrative. But the can didn't arrive as a single bright idea. It sneaked in through the back door wearing a uniform. In the mid-18th century, the Dutch Navy were using tinned iron canisters, meat packed in fat and sealed into a can. And before the 18th century even ends, there's evidence of a small Dutch salmon trade doing something similar. Salmon cleaned, cooked in boiling brine, smoked over wood, put in a tin plate box, filled with hot salted butter or olive oil, and then the lid soldered on. This wasn't modern canning, it was preservation as naval pragmatism. But the mindset is already there. Food as cargo, time as something you can bargain with, hunger as a problem you can outsource to metal.
Moo.
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 Moo. Moo.
If you want a recognisable inventor moment, you get it with Nicolas Appert in France. Napoleon offered a cash prize for a way to feed his armies, and Appert won it. The method was the breakthrough. Seal food airtight, heat it, and it keeps. And then comes a part nobody brags about. Early manufacture used lead solder to seal cans. Poisonous, not in a fashionable microdosing way, in the heavy metal way. It's one of those details that reminds you how modernity often arrives not as a clean leap forward, but as a practical solution with an aftertaste everyone pretends not to notice. Now, the canned food is poor people's food cliché needs to be shot quietly behind the bins. In Europe in the mid-19th century, canned food became a status symbol, a frivolous novelty, the edible equivalent of owning a new gadget you don't need but enjoy displaying. It's hard to feel sorry for someone eating tin delicacies in a drawing room, but it makes the point. Canned food didn't begin life as desperation rations. It began as modernity you could talk about, put on a plate, show off. Later, when canning scales and cheapens, tins drift down the social ladder. They become ordinary. We like to pretend that's about taste. It's mostly about systems. For a while, the canned food experience was simple. Here's the future, please now attack it with a blade. Jerome K. Jerome understood this perfectly in 3 Men in a Boat with the Tin of Pineapple, a supposedly convenient product requiring improvised violence and a small loss of dignity just to get it open. It works because it's recognisable. Until the invention of the can opener, people literally used hammers and chisels to open tins. That's packaging that protects the product brilliantly but has no particular interest in your fingers. Packaging is always slightly ahead of human hands. Cans arrived and only later did we work out how to open them without risking injury.
Moo.
Now you might ask yourself, how long does canned food last? And the answer is long enough to be creepy. This is where the tin stops being mundane and becomes a bit uncanny. There's a slightly deranged study involving a steamboat called Bertrand. It sank in the Missouri River in 1865, and in 1974 the National Food Processors Association tested canned food recovered from the wreck. Appearance, smell and vitamin content had deteriorated, but there was reportedly no trace of microbial growth, and the 109-year-old food was judged safe to eat, although nobody seems to have actually eaten any. That's impressive and also unsettling. The can doesn't just preserve food, it preserves the possibility of food. The tin can doesn't defeat time, it just makes time somebody else's problem. If there's a moment when tin food stops being a novelty and becomes an instrument, it's the First World War. The war doesn't just consume men, it consumes supply. It requires industrial feeding, calories on schedule, protein in transportable units. You see it in the soldiers' language. Biscuits and bully beef, not dinner, not cooking, just fuel. The Imperial War Museum's oral histories make the point in a way no historian can improve. Biscuits like dog biscuits, bully beef when we're lucky. And there's a larger shift behind that misery. The war accelerates the normalisation of processed and preserved foods. It isn't just feeding troops, it changes civilian consumption habits as the whole industrial apparatus reorganises what people can get and how they can get it. And this is where the can becomes good at what it's always been. A unit in a system, portable, stackable, countable, a meal designed to be moved. In Britain, Fray Bentos is an old-fashioned brand name, drifting around the back of the cupboard like our half-remembered uncle. It's pies in tins, corned beef, OXO cubes. That particular post-war flavour of reassurance, where food is beige and the adverts smile a bit too hard. In Uruguay, Fray Bentos is a town, on the river Uruguay. And for a century, it was also a factory. It was known locally as La Cocina del Mundo, the kitchen of the world, or perhaps more accurately described as the slaughterhouse of the world. Around 700 million cows are estimated to have gone through it over its 100-odd years of operation. At its peak, the place could process an entire cow in 7 minutes. Say it out loud and listen to what it does to the room. 7 minutes isn't, in any sane moral universe, the amount of time it should take to dismantle a large mammal with a history, a digestive system, and the faintly comic habit of looking at you as if you're the one with the problem. 7 minutes per cow is the same kind of number as items per hour in an Amazon warehouse. Different bodies, same logic. But that's the point. 7 minutes isn't a fact about cows, it's a fact about modernity. Because once you can do a cow in 7 minutes, you can do anything in 7 minutes if you stop asking what the thing is. So the cow becomes an object in a system, a unit. The clock is the boss, and the minute hand, as ever, is indifferent. 7 minutes per cow means the factory isn't only a building, it's a tempo. Everything arranged to serve speed. Conveyor logic, gravity feeds, separation by purpose, waste turned into product, byproducts monetized so nothing is allowed to die for free. The cow gives up leather, then meat, then fat, then bone, then whatever else can be boiled down into something saleable. Even the waste becomes fertilizer, shipped away to grow more food. It's almost elegant if you ignore what the elegance is doing. And the factory lends its name to a wartime story, the Fray Bentos boys. The crew of a Mark IV tank called Fray Bentos were trapped in no man's land in August 1917, holding out through the longest tank action of the war and eventually surviving. The legend of the nickname is believable, a tank as corned beef tin on tracks, metal, cramped, sealed, men packed in like provisions. It's a dark joke, but soldiers are entitled to dark jokes. They're one of the few groups that can claim them as a workplace perk. But it also does something else. It reminds you that once a culture learns to process bodies as units, that metaphor travels. My mind goes unwillingly to another place where death was processed with discipline, only the raw materials weren't cows, it was people. The death camps of the Second World War were that method applied to human beings. Not the same by any stretch, not morally, not historically, not in scale of evil, but recognisable by the cold mechanics. How modernity can make organised death feel like administration. The horror is managerial. It's the calmness, the competence, the way the whole system is designed so that nothing interrupts the flow. And the flow, once established, starts to feel like a natural law, as if cows were always meant to move through a sequence of rooms and become a set of products with names. Walk through a place like that and you start to understand why the tin can is such a persuasive object. A sealed cylinder that says nothing will change inside me, nothing can get in, time will wait outside. But time doesn't disappear, it just gets transferred. It becomes somebody else's problem.
Moo.
Moo.
So, is canned food a staple for the poor? Often yes, but that's recent. By the time the tin gets to the poor, it's already had several careers. Canned food becomes a staple because it's what I'd call infrastructure food. It works when life doesn't. Fresh food assumes time, money, storage, a functioning kitchen and a future you can plan for. Poverty is what happens when several of those assumptions fail at once, so you choose food that tolerates chaos. A can doesn't mind if your wheat collapses, it will still be there, and that's why I like them. But it's worth remembering the arc. Tins started as naval pragmatism, they became a middle-class novelty, then a mass industrial weapon of provisioning, then ordinary food, then poverty food, and then occasionally comfort food again. The object didn't change, the world around it did. And then, along comes the tin can's smooth Scandinavian cousin, the carton. Tetra Pak looks like progress, lightweight, hygienic, modern, almost apologetic. It's also one of the great fortune engines of the 20th century, founded in 1951 by Reuben Rousing and built on the simple observation that everyone drinks something daily forever and would rather not think about how it arrives. It's also the only object in your kitchen capable of humiliating you before 8 a.m. Have you ever tried to open one of those cartons while late for a train? You don't so much open it as negotiate a minor disaster that usually ends with orange juice in your hair. The contents leave first, and you stand there holding an empty flap like someone who's lost an argument with geometry.
Moo.
This isn't just comic relief, it's the point in miniature. Packaging doesn't remove friction, it relocates it. Industry gets speed and scale, you get the mess. And this is why the tin can refuses to die. We keep inventing replacements, cartons, pouches, clever laminates with marketing copy about sustainability, but they tend to win on one axis and lose on another. The can is crude and heavy and a bit Victorian, but it still wins because it does the job brutally well. It stacks, it ships, it survives, it seals. You can drop it, forget it, leave it in a cupboard through 3 governments and a minor personal breakdown, and it will still be there. It separates eating from season, place, and local labour. It makes hunger manageable. Calories become units, meals become logistics, populations become provisionable. Which is why the tin can belongs in the same family as the container ship, the warehouse, the barcode, the expiry date, and that algorithm deciding what sits at eye level in the supermarket aisle. It's part of the machinery that turns survival into a distribution problem and then charges you for the privilege of not thinking about it. And if you listen closely, behind the reassuring clink of metal in the cupboard, you can hear the faint rustle of the bigger system doing what it always does, making survival efficient, scalable, and just distant enough that you can call it choice without laughing. Tell me in the comments what's the oldest can in your cupboard and whether you trust it more than you trust yourself. I found this in my cupboard. A tin of bear meat that I bought in Finland, that's a different story, with an expiry date of 2020. So that's already 6 years out of date, so only another 103 years to go before I can eat it. Wow. And if you've got an object you want me to put under the same cold light, something ordinary that's secretly running the world, tell me what it is. I'm building an archive of overlooked machines, everyday objects with meaning.
Moo.
Moo. Moo.
Moo.
Moo.
Moo.
Moo.
Moo.